Hello friends, and welcome to Figure Study, where we appreciate the form in Transformers. And today, we're going to be taking a look at Studio Series Blackout. Boy, this is a big helicopter. Okay, so I actually had the original Transformers movie, Voyager Class Blackout, I believe it was, back in the day when it first came out, and thought that was a pretty cool toy. And then I just sold it off, and once I kind of got back into all this, I kind of wanted to get it back, and I didn't really want to pay a ton of money, because for some reason it was selling for a fair bit, and I was kind of like, I don't know. I kept going back and forth with myself on that, because I thought Blackout was actually pretty darn cool. And then I saw the announcement for Studio Series Blackout, and was kind of like, okay, I'll wait for that. So, I have this now, and this is a thing. So getting right into it, Blackout is, I forget the exact make of the helicopter, but as I understand it, it's a type of Black Hawk. It looks really good. It's got, panels here and there, and a couple of them don't quite lock in as well as I'd like, but all things considered, it does look pretty darn good. And it's big. I know everyone who does a video on this says that, but really, it's big. Definitely not the biggest figure I have, probably not the biggest figure that a lot of people have, but still, this is a big helicopter. It really, really is. And because I feel it's customary, here you can see Black Hawk with Studio Series Starscream, and it's just, again, big helicopter mode. Which, ultimately I'm fine with. I think it's really impressive, but kind of a nightmare to fit on a shelf. Especially with those rotors. Those things are just yikes. Anyway, with those size comparisons out of the way, Blackout in his helicopter mode is, like I said, pretty impressive. There's a lot of little details in here, too. Lots of little paneling and stuff like that. Which, yes, it's me, so of course I'm actually kind of tempted to do some panel lighting on here, but I don't quite know if I want to do that or not, because the gray plastic here is light enough that you can actually make out the textured detail, so I don't necessarily think it's needed. It is a pretty darn cool looking helicopter with some painted bits in the, I guess these are air filters or something on the top there? I don't really know. Not a whole lot of paint in this mode though, because there's like a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit on the inside there as we saw, with like some tampograph details here and there. And then there's, this window is painted, and none of the other windows are painted, and I don't know why they just painted one window, and I don't know why they didn't just not paint any of the windows. It just seems a bit weird that they only painted one. I feel like it wouldn't stand out as much if they painted none of them. And you got the details in the front, and here he has the clear windows, which, as I always say, I'm not a huge fan of, but it doesn't bother me too much here, because you really can't see much in the way of anything inside there. Like, you can kind of see the top of his head if you know that's the top of his head, but in this instance, the clear windows don't bother me that much. I still think it'd be better if they were just like a solid color, but whatever. And yeah, there's not a whole lot for me to say about the helicopter mode, because it's a helicopter. But from what I can see, it's a pretty legit looking one. Could do with a little more paint here and there, but all these figures could. But it doesn't really bother me here. And one other thing, just because we will drop his little passenger here. It's a very inappropriate place to keep a scorpion. But yeah, here we've got Scorponok, and this is also nicely detailed and nicely painted, which, it's cool, but like, I feel like this paint probably could have been better served on the robot itself, because it's Scorponok. I get it. In the movie, he dropped Scorponok off at the Air Force Base or whatever it was, and all that chaos ensued. Do we really care? Do we really, honestly and truly care if a movie Blackout comes with a Scorponok? Because I can tell you right now, I don't. If this was not here and Blackout just had more stuff going on in terms of paint scheme, I'd be totally down for that. Because I just tuck it into the helicopter to get it out of the way, or clip it onto his back in robot mode to get it out of the way, because it's just kind of there. I appreciate the detailing. I appreciate the fact that they actually did separate out the legs so that they're a different color from the midsection here. And they did some nice paint with the silver and this sort of goldish copper with little red eyes and all that. It's like it's well done. It's nicely detailed. It's nicely painted, but it's an unnecessary component. Something that I feel like could have been better. Like that money could have been better spent on the robot itself. But I don't know. I'm probably in the minority there, because you all know me and accessories. I'm usually not that big on them. But anyway, I think that's about all I can really say about the helicopter mode. So let's see how well I can do this. Okay, I hope I got most of that on camera, because not easy to do. It's just a lot of stuff flopping around in the midst of all that, and yeah. But as rough as that transformation can be, I am completely into this. This looks fantastic. I do have nitpicks with this, which I will get into, but overall, this is a really nice looking movie Blackout. I am here for this figure, man. It's really nice, and you can kind of see where some of the paint went that wasn't on the outside. Obviously the face, but then you've got like a little bit here and there, like primarily up around his shoulders in that backpack area. I feel like that probably could have gone elsewhere, but it is what it is. Though I will say, even though there's not a whole lot of paint on this guy, they actually broke the colors up really nicely. Like his feet and his forearms, and then like kind of a decent chunk of his midsection is all that same kind of grayish color of the helicopter mode. But then you've got little bits of like this more plain gray for like the hands and forearms and thighs, and even like a little bit of darker gray for the shin pieces and this little dongle thing and the helicopter blades in the back that you can hardly see from here. Even though he's not painted that much, it does break up the color pretty nicely regardless. So, you know, bravo Hasbro for distributing the color in such a way that it makes me not really care that much about the fact that he doesn't have too much paint. There was a little bit in that pelvis area where they painted some silver here and some slightly gunmetalish gray in the center there to kind of break it up a bit more, and I think that actually works really well. So, yeah, really well done. The silhouette of this Blackout is not super strong just because it's kind of hard to make a silhouette out in all this. You know, it's kind of like a triangle with legs sticking out if you're just looking at that, but that doesn't really bother me either, because you can actually clearly make out his bits like legs and arms and torso and all that, despite the fact that he is kind of a mess. But like, he's a mess in a way that I really like. Yes, he is shorter for a leader, which, we'll do size comparisons in a minute, but he might be short for a leader figure, but you've got this enormous helicopter, relatively speaking, that kind of opens up and then compacts in after it's opened up to make a semi-squat-ish robot. And that's actually really impressive to me, the fact that, like, this sort of short-ish robot ends up expanding out so much to create a much larger helicopter mode. And now this is one of my favorite things about Blackout. I just really love the helicopter blade cape. It's such a simple idea, but I really love it. It's a really cool idea. It's a really cool way to kind of make all that nonsense less of an issue. I do kind of wish that the blades would lay flush, or not even flush, but like I kind of wish that they kind of were a bit more even in terms of where they rest. And that may just be my thing. It may be that I'm doing it wrong, but it's a minor nitpick, really. And I also think, all things considered, his backpack compacts very nicely. Like, there's not a whole lot of really kibble on this guy. Technically, all that stuff above his shoulders, I guess, is kibble, but that's his design, so it doesn't really bother me. Like I said, totally kibble, but I do actually rather like it. It's like this big engine turbine just sticking out over his head, and you can see they did actually put some paint in there. And I guess this, I can understand why they painted it, because if this wasn't painted, that would look really out of place, just like right over his head there. And they also have on the inside here, these bits are painted, which again, kind of unnecessary, but at the same time, it does break up the color monotony that would have been over his shoulders otherwise. So I can kind of see where they came from with that. Thankfully, they didn't do any painting underneath these bits, because that would have been completely superfluous. And now moving on to that metallic, crystalline, insectile mess that he calls a face. I mean, this face is a mess. It is completely a mess. It's like just jaggedy edges everywhere with like two little red eyes poking out, but I'm kind of into it. I mean, I don't think we saw that much of Blackout in the movie to really get a good look at his face, but I'm kind of okay with this face. It's appropriately bad guy looking. It's definitely got kind of like a predator bug mouth going, which is a bit on the yee side, but at the same time, I do kind of dig it. And I like that they have this like regular blue for the head with like the silver kind of in the face and the red eyes. It's like, three different colors that kind of lend themselves to make more of those details in his face pop. And this is very crisp molding in that face too, so yeah. I don't dislike it. I do actually like the face. I don't know, I think it's like these bits on top, they kind of seem a bit almost showy, like he's trying to wear a crown or something like that. I don't know. But like I said, didn't really get that good of a look at his face in the movie, so who knows? I'm sure a bunch of you know, actually. And looking at some of the other finer details around here, you can see the exposed robot bits have some nice texture on them, because of course they do. He has the, get this arm out of the way slightly. He does have the chicken legs, which I know bothers some people, but I actually think the chicken legs for the Decepticons and even the Autobots, like, it doesn't bother me. I actually kind of like the chicken leg look. I don't know, it's like, it's slightly different. Also with some mechanical detail there, and some different colors, like the lighter gray here and then the darker gray here. These bits are kind of unnecessary, but at the same time, I don't really mind them. Like, it's just a matter of figuring out a good place to have them rest. It's extra details, whatever. Feet actually work really well. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about them once I got them in hand, because of how the entire side of the helicopter is just the bottom of his foot. But it actually works pretty well, and it hides pretty well when he's actually standing there, just on the shelf in robot mode, so I am fine with that. I think some people take issue with his parts forming... bring that down a little bit. With his parts forming rotor. I'm fine with it. Really, the only thing about this that bugs me is the fact that this sticks out so far. It can kind of bang into his shoulder, but small price to pay, I think. It's fine. It's fine. We're all fine. Really, there are just two things about this guy that bug me, and that is the fact that these bits don't lock into place, as nobody's does, even though there is a slot right there for this to go. That just doesn't stay, so it's real easy for that to come loose. And it's fine for like regular poses, but can be a little annoying when trying to pose him. And the other thing that kind of bugs me is his hands. I mean, I think his hands look good. There's some nice detail molded in there and everything, and I think the, three-fingered shape is fine. They even seem to have a little bit of molded detail on the inside of the hand. But it's the angle. He can only have his hand down like this, and you can turn it, but even if you turn it to try and do the gorilla arms thing, now his hand is like facing backwards. So if you want him to have like a regular kind of hand, you kind of have to turn it like this, and that doesn't really work. There's some nice molded detail on the insides of these bits, which is great, but it's a lot of kibble kind of hanging off of his forearms there to kind of get in the way if you want to display him like that. So pretty much left having to put him like this with the hands facing down, and that just, it bugs me a little bit. And as was mentioned previously, Scorponok does have a place to go in this mode. It's just, stick him on his butt. It's fine that you can do that, but it kind of gets in the way of the helicopter rotors. And now he just has a scorpion hanging off his back. I mean, it gets him out of the way, but again, we didn't need Scorponok. Scorponok is kind of a superfluous piece at this point. And yes, I know, movie Blackout, of course he comes with Scorponok, but it just doesn't seem necessary at this point. He doesn't do anything. I might be in the minority in thinking it, but I just feel like adding Scorponok was just a waste of money. They could have done more with the figure instead, but I'm not the toy designer. Anyway, moving on to size comparisons. Here is Leader Blackout with a Power of the Primes Deluxe, and I mean, he's not a small robot, not by any means, in the general pantheon of size classes, but he's not that big for a leader, which, again, doesn't really bother me considering how he manages to kind of expand into that enormous helicopter mode and how everything kind of accordions in and smushes in to make what is, I guess, a short robot considering the size of the alt mode, but a very dense one. And we have Blackout with Studio Series Voyager Starscream, and here you can see a little bit better how that size class is not quite showing up in his robot mode, because Starscream's pretty much the same height as him. I mean, yeah, you can like stretch his legs up a bit, but ultimately they're about the same height. And that, again, does not bother me in the slightest, because you can tell there's a lot more mass to Blackout than there is to Starscream. And they do look excellent next to each other. I think, even though I'm not into all of the Studio Series figures, I do think that putting various Studio Series figures next to each other makes for a really nice display. So yeah, I think that's about all there is for me to say about Studio Series Blackout currently. I do wish that those hands could go at a different angle, but it's not like I'm going to be having him hold a sword or a gun or anything like that, so it's not terrible. It's just a little bit eh. And it would be nice if those shoulders actually clipped or pegged in properly. But again, not a huge deal, especially since they kind of sit back anyway. Like if they normally sat forward like that, that would annoy me. But they do kind of rest in a regular, kind of standard-looking position, so I'm fine with that. Yeah, overall, very cool figure. I truthfully can't decide if I like him or Grimlock more out of the two leaders that we've gotten from Studio Series so far. But I think I've been going on long enough about Blackout, so what do you all think of Studio Series Blackout? I mean, I think the consensus on this guy pretty much across the board has been that he is very cool, but I know there are always going to be outliers. I mean, I'm probably one of the only people who hates the inclusion of Scorponok because it seems completely pointless, but I've said enough about that as it is. So yeah, what do you all think? Are you disappointed with the fact that he's a bit shorter, or does that not really bother you? Do you prefer the original 2007 Blackout over this? Does the parts-forming tail rotor arm blade thingy bother you, or is that not a big deal either? And even though we do have this, would anyone else out there be down for a movie masterpiece Blackout? Because I totally would be. I've said that before, but I definitely would be on that in a second. And a movie masterpiece Starscream, that would be nice too. Whatever your thoughts, please feel free to comment down below. I always enjoy hearing from you all. And while you're at it, also feel free to like or subscribe. Any combination of those would make me a happy Rob. And remember, art is more than meets the eye.